Simply put, it just elevates the review when an initial or resubmittal is provided, elevates it to the top of the list for the review agencies to consider as it
as of June 4th, 2026, and you made your decision on this application that was originally submitted March 12th, 2026. So I just want to remind myself and others, what we're appealing today is everything that was submitted March 12th, nothing after. I don't care about the emails that came later. That's not the appeal that we're talking about. So we're talking about everything that the Radin Incorporated submitted March 12th. And this decision was approved by this planning commission June 11th, which is 6 days after the stage 3 emergency drought was declared in our state. So, let me say, the proposed Taurus AI data center submitted March 12th, 2026, which is the application number DEPN/26-0039 to modify the development plan for approximately, it says 21.96 acres. Yes, I took this picture. This is right behind where they want to build it, by the way. It's Douglas Creek is immediately adjacent to this facility. And basically, this is 1565 High-Tech Way. I was in charge of this project yesterday, July 22nd, 2026, on page 2 from the legal team, from the applicant, Brownstein, Hyatt, Farber, and Schrepp, I hope I'm saying that right, LLP. It says that they do not, that it was approved by y'all, the Planning Commission. They do not see that this applicant would create more adverse impacts on the surrounding properties than the development approval or permit proposed to be modified, quote. So I asked the Planning Commissions, because you're gonna have to respond to this, to prove that exactly in detail, not just like, oh, it makes sense. No, you need to prove in detail in a legal way how this does comply with the UDC code. And you also need to, if you cannot prove that Radin Incorporated in their original application, March 12th, nothing after, we're talking legal here, does actually comply with UDC and will not create adverse effects on the surrounding environment, then you could possibly approve it, but I don't think you can prove that, so this should be null and void. In addition, nowhere in the original proposal, submitted March 12th, 2026, not July 22nd, 2026, the one that we're appealing, nowhere in there is there any written information or written indication of an agreement in the original proposal that what Radin plans to do with the wastewater or toxic wastewater byproducts such as glycol, which cannot simply be put through the sewage system. There is no bond.
As I indicated.
I'm explaining myself, thank you. There is no bond. There is a bond that talked about the acoustic effects, nothing that talks about the wastewater effects. There's no written information, there's no written promise, there's no written indication in their original application what they will do with this wastewater and their proposed 36 chillers, which says it could be up to 72 chillers in their computing facility, which we have found in Wyoming from Meta's 7,100,000 square foot data center. You can find it on Fortune.com, you can find it on Forbes.com, you can find it on Syracuse.com. I could keep going, but I won't. It released a rare bacterium that completely contaminated their city's water system because they tried to run the wastewater through the sewage. Can't do it. I'm a biologist. I went to school for 10 years. You can't tell me that it's not going to do harm because you literally just admitted also in your own slides that there's basically in conjunction with heat islands, completely untested environmental effects. Because at the time that in 2020, when they talked about how this original site, 1565 High-Tech Way, would be zoned for a microchip plant, there was no larger understanding of what data centers are and what they did. And I would like you to explain how that fits into the UDCs. I don't think you can, and it is on you to explain this. We're gonna go back, we have it all written down. Okay. So also in January 19th, January 2029, when you adopted Plan COS, this was with y'all, the Planning Commission stating that you will build a city to create build a great city that matches their scenery. When people think of matching their scenery, they think of Pikes Peak, they think of Garden of the Gods. They don't think of a large compilation of computing facilities in a man-made box, making large noises that also creates heat islands. That is not why people come here. $272 million is brought into the city by Garden of the Gods, not by an alleged data center. People don't come here and they're like, let me see the data center.
Folks,
no,
please.
Not happening. And it's not in your own plan, on your own website, coloradosprings.gov/plancos. That is your own wording, that is your own plan, and you're not abiding by UDC code or your own plan. So I would love to make an emotional appeal, but I honestly don't think you care, so we're gonna stick to the legal facts, because we're winning.
Thank you, Ms. Proud.
You need to answer these questions in a legal way, or you need to, this plan needs to be null and void.
Ms.
because
Claus?
it does not follow these, it does not follow.
Thank you
your
so
own
much.
plan. Thank you, you're welcome.
Again, the time to settle between speakers or applause during speakers only cuts into those speakers.
To appeal Project Taurus. I go to Garden of the Gods every day, and I'm Springs born, and that's how I learned of this very issue. Driving on a weekly basis to Garden of the Gods, you could feel the presence of what's to come. Not just the signs, but the awareness in the community we've heard loud and clear. I'm not the only one taking today off out of my work schedule, taking time out of my life for research. I'm not the only one who's awake of what is going on. The noise pollution is very obviously an issue of data centers. Every time you hear about a data center, those on the front lines are complaining. They are in pain. This is no issue that's fixed with an acoustic wall. Data centers, you can't pull a Depeche Mode. You cannot enjoy the silence. There's a consistent theme. These residents have headaches, vertigo, nausea, ear pain, hypertension. You're trying to raise your kids in that community, good luck. You're gonna wanna move out and something may wanna move in. These complaints about data centers aren't even always about the level of the noise. Who cares if it enters the city ordinance, if this is so consistent for public health and well-being that the 24/7 noise is becoming dismantling for the well-being. They are not able to enter the recovery sleep they need. They even have constant ringing in their ears. When they can't hear it, they feel it. That's due to infrasound. It's felt and not heard. Infrasound begins below the audible acoustic spectrum, below 20 hertz. And boy, does it hurt, because infrasound has a different power in its structure. Long wavelengths make it go beyond a mile, beyond many miles, hundreds of miles, without losing much energy at all. In fact, you can see in the bottom right picture an obstacle such as solid rock, or even the hill at the proposed Taurus data site will not stop infrasound. It will pass and bend around through refraction, diffraction. It is not absorbed by air molecules. This infrasound is powerful because it is even something that our bodies don't protect against. Our cavities in our heart, our stomach, and our chest, they enhance and resonate this infrasound. And it can cause illness and further symptoms that we saw in the earlier slide, where when you're constantly exposed to this resonating influence, even 5 hertz can resonate in your chest. That is in the infrasound spectrum. You'll be feeling the nausea. You'll be feeling the vertigo. If you move near a data site yourself, you would easily feel it. The data is clear what is causing this. The residents are saying, we don't know what happened, we just feel different. What happened was something new came into the land that wasn't planned for, that the community had yet to awaken up the consequence of. The humming of the cooling chillers, the whirling of the fans, and even when they use their emergency diesel generators, are gonna generate infrasound 24/7, 365 days a year. Even in the city's memo where they're bringing up the additional acoustic wall as a solution, keep in mind first, radon paid for the report. I don't buy a suit that won't suit me. I will pay for a report that doesn't report well on me. They're independent from the city's sound individual. He even acknowledges a problem. You see in the city memo, it states, During this review, the sound consultant also advised city staff that scientific research on infrasound and low-frequency sound remains limited, and that no consistent regulatory framework exists nationwide to address these issues. What I find interesting is that shortly after that, the memo even states that research has not established a measurable level linked to health impacts. I don't think this is a sound statement on sound because research was easily found to prove otherwise. What is interesting is that this research I found was published in Noise and Health, June of 2021, well before today's date, 5 years ago. And in this study, something else I think is very funny. You'll hear the impacts of the study. But even in their conclusion, they state numerous independent laboratory research from around the globe has been performed, resulting in similar findings supporting this conclusion. This is not limited research. This is easily linked to health impacts because this study they did in Germany. Those undergoing heart surgery allowed tissue to be removed from their heart and put in vitro. That way it could have electronic pulsations, creating a stimulation where it is a beating heart. 2 segments are created. For 2 hours, one segment experiences no additional change. For simply 1 hour, the other segment is given 100 decibels on a zero-weighted scale of infrasound. They even did 110 and 120. Keep in mind, they started at 100 decibels on a zero-weighted scale. That 100 decibels of infrasound at 16 hertz is still going to fall inside the city's code. It will be at 45 hertz on the current A-weighted scale. And yet, in their research, they concluded that 100 decibels on zero-weighted of infrasound has negative effects on cardiac function. Now we're understanding why hypertension is happening around data centers. People aren't just feeling something, there is negative health consequence with a clear data linked to it. And the danger already is that acoustic barrier will do no good. We've already shown in the last slide, infrasound doesn't give a care. If something's in its way, it will find a way, just as we as a community will today. Thank you. Firstly though, I want to recognize that this code, the UDC, the Unified Development Code, is outdated. It is using an A-weighted scale, which was made for barking dogs, loud block parties, and construction noise. We have a modern world that was never foreseen, where the 365, 24/7 chiller effect is infrared sound, not infrared sound, it is infrasound having a devastating effect. So at a minimum, we need to reconsider the A-weighted. A-weighted scales purposefully cut out any infrasound. Anything that we can't audibly hear is cut out, diminished, taken out. Even a C-weighted scale would be meeting in the middle, where we would at least have some way of taking into account these lower frequencies that have a clear effect. And when you speak of what law does this break, what does this affect? Look back at the Noise Control Act of 1972, one reason why the city even has a noise ordinance under 9.8.104. It is declared, it is the policy of the United States to promote an environment for all Americans free from noise that jeopardizes their health or welfare. This presentation, along with many others you'll see, the health and welfare clearly is jeopardized. The noise is clearly pollution. This is a problem. Even 30 decibels on an A-weighted scale is the sound of silence. So as you hear these applicants saying, this will only be at 40 decibels, 45, keep in mind our awareness of what those numbers mean is so skewed. You will feel it when you hear it. In conclusion, I'm asking the City Commission to build trust with our community, not build noise. You've received so much noise and emails and calls. Let this not be your future. Let this moment not be a stain in your past. You can make a change that will better last. Our community, the families, will be wiser for the future of our community. You see those in our state, Denver has a unanimously approved moratorium banning data centers, at least for a year, while they do impact studies. Monument is heavily considering banning them, currently has a moratorium, as they even work on new zoning laws. Why don't we do a moratorium and we work on changing our code? There's time to build this bridge with the community, build trust. And just continue with a few more numbers. Jefferson County, another neighbor, 10-month moratorium. Woodland Park, even closer, 18-month moratorium. Boulder County, 6-month moratorium. We have our doors open, and there's a running theme of out-of-state companies coming in-state and pulling out before people wake up and recognize the consequences. Now's our time when people are awake, where you don't have the pressure to be in the world arena yet. Right now you're on a small stage. Wait long enough, you'll be on a big stage with more eyes on you than you can count. I respectfully ask you to decline Project Taurus. One final note, names are important, symbolism is important. People don't name their child nothing. They name them something for a reason. Greek mythology shows Taurus is Zeus disguising himself to secretly kidnap Europa, a princess. But wait, there's more. We'll pull Billy Mays. So when he kidnaps her to the island Crete, he wins her over with gifts. Just as you're trying to be won over by Radon, who's Zeus. Zeus is lightning, he is power. You're trying to be won over by someone hiding who they are. They will win you over with wonderful promises of tax revenue? Is that all it is? I'm trying to come up with a better answer, and that's something. I'm not trying to be rude here, but you understand that even if Zeus is able to win over a princess with gifts, their kids, 2 of the 3, become rulers of the underworld. So these kids, even if you get one kid who's giving you tax benefits, the 2 other kids are going to be misery for the people and a stain on our community. Let us say openly together, Project Taurus is not for us. Thank you.
Record, I have just passed out Integrity Matters objection.
Can you use the microphone and state your name, please?
This is before we begin.
Microphone, please.
Well, but I don't know if folks can hear what you're trying to say without the microphone.
Please restart the clock. Before we begin, this is Integrity Matters objection to the waiver that the City of Colorado Springs signed for their attorney Brownstein to also represent the applicant Radon in these proceedings.
Miss Gale, I think this.
A lot
Ms.
of
Gale.
what was said in advance were things pointed out by Brownstein. Brownstein was the one who went after the appellants for whether or not they met the
Ms.
special.
Gale, I think that this should be part of your presentation because this seems fairly informative and information. So why don't we, I don't think that this can be a precursor to your presentation. This seems party to your discussion.
It is part.
That's fine, we can reset the clock. That's fine, we'll reset the clock, but I think that this should be part of your formal presentation. Exactly, thank you. Sir, I'm gonna ask you to be kind or to leave. Okay, thank you.
So
Hi
please
there.
reset the clock with
We will
this new
reset this
information.
clock.
Yeah.
Everybody that is speaking will need to introduce themselves into the microphone, first and last name. Thank you.
Trevor, do you have any other comments?
As to,
Anything, I just wanna make sure if you have anything else you wanted to add as we begin. Okay, thank you. All right, thank you.
All right, hello, my name is Catherine Kent. I'll be introducing our appeal of the Project Taurus Development Plan Major Modification. We're here today because a decision that changed the use of a 22-acre campus was made at a staff desk. We're here to talk about what the code required and what the code does and what the record does not contain. This presentation includes 5 consolidated appeals, 34 appellants with standing, and 7 independent grounds. Our pro bono counsel, Kat Gale, will get into more of that with you. We wanted to express a huge thank you to everyone not being paid to be here today, and a thank you to the others who put in appeals and ceded their time to allow Integrity Matters to put forth a full and comprehensive argument, more commensurate with the time the developer will be receiving. Today you'll be hearing from me, Kat Gale, Deirdre Aiden-Smith, and 2 experts, John O'Brien and John Forshee. We're also joined today by Ron Brambecker, say hi Ron, who is spending his birthday here in support of the neighborhood. We're hoping your birthday gift to him will be to send us back. Ron's house was the first house on our block. He moved there for the peace and quiet. Ron is a 100% disabled, housebound Army Special Forces veteran with a service dog. The city planners have this information, but no one reached out to him about his accommodations and what needed to be done to protect him in these plans under the ADA. All right, we're gonna see if I can get the slides to work, guys. All right. This is where I live. You can see Chelsea Glen to the left up on the screen there. This is my home, my neighborhood, and the place my husband and I envisioned raising our young children. A football field to our north is the campus we are discussing in this appeal. Here you can see that the loudest, hottest, and constantly running approved equipment on the site was placed on the side facing the houses. When we moved into this community, this facility was meant to be a solar manufacturing plant. When we moved, and when many of my neighbors moved in, it was an Intel chip fab. We understood and expected that it would be light industry. The reason we find ourselves here today, well, specifically light industry, I'm gonna talk about that for a second. Light industry refers to light industrial uses and complementary services that are clean, quiet, and visually unobtrusive. Warehouse-like buildings in industrial areas with limited public-facing activity is where the resemblance ends with data centers. Many modern cities, for the record, treat data centers as a separate, unique category. Older or less specialized local laws place data centers under light industrial because they look quiet, while the opposite is true. The reason we find ourselves here today is because while we also expected this would be light industry, we expected that the city of Colorado Springs would protect its people and enforce its own code. I'll pass things over to Ms. Gale to talk more about what this appeal is asking for today.
What we ask for a reversal or a remand, not that the commission redecides or approves de novo. Every ground of our appeal rests on a documented record defect or missing finding. We ask the commission to hear the appeal de novo under section 7.5.415C1. What we do not ask is that it act in the first instance. Slide. You are making a quasi-judicial decision. You are meant to decide independently with the full record before you. A decision applying the wrong legal standard or resting on findings the record does not support would be an abuse of your discretion. Section 7.5.415A7 has the entire planning department file becoming a part of the record. That's the minutes, that's the maps, that's the emails, drawings, reports, and applications. You are not bound to the June 11th decision. That is precisely why we are here, because the June 11th decision was deficient on its face. Slide. The standard commands us to brief how the criteria for the relevant application have or have not been met. And those are the criteria. You cannot decide whether the decision was erroneous without examining the criteria it applied or failed to apply. The city published a written criteria analysis on June 15th, 4 days after the decision. If it cannot tell the appellate body the criteria are off limits. Fine. 7 grounds, each pled separately under 7.5.415A2. Affirmance of this decision requires every finding. One ground alone defeats the approval. Slide. The code requires a development to protect public health, safety, and welfare. The memo applied only section 7.5.516D. It never reached 7.5.409. That is the criterion where this site's real hazards live. 30 to 60 diesel generators and fuel storage above the Douglas Creek Fountain Creek drainage, 72 chillers with their noise. Your own comment claims no hazardous materials in use, while the approved plan shows the generators and fuel storage. Slide. This is the receiving property. 368 feet, 1 football field from these residences. Figure 11 of our supplement sets out precisely which findings section 7.5.409 required and which are absent. Slide. A major modification acknowledged by the planner cannot be approved by staff. A major modification may only be approved by the decision-making body that approved the original using the same procedure. B1 authorizes the manager to approve a minor modification only. They've acknowledged it's major. The classification is not ours, it's the city's. Filed on the major modification checklist, June 15 memo says administratively approved as a major modification. 25 years of minor amendments inside the approved use. This one changed the use itself. Slide. A major modification must satisfy 7.5.515D1, the development plan criteria, and 7.5.409, the general criteria, compatibility, off-site impact, mitigation, water quality, health, safety, welfare. Again, health, safety, and welfare. Health, safety, and welfare are listed as the primary purpose of our development code. It goes on to say, to promote health, safety, and general welfare, to protect private property from adjacent noise, from adjacent nuisance such as incompatible uses and noise. That is the purpose of our entire UDC, which you have failed to remember today. Okay, slide. This was approved administratively. You cannot approve administratively a major modification unless you go back to the original. The city confirmed this, and we have tracked it for 25 years. No body, no procedure, and the original approval is not part of the city review. The UDC provides no administrative pathway for a major modification at all. Slide. The contradiction is this. The applicant uses ARDP 00177 as the original development plan. This is styled as an amendment. AR stands for an amendment request. Area of amendment to an approved development plan. That is not the original. The city's database calls it an amendment to a development plan for Intel. Disposition, unknown. File designation, DPA. That cannot be the basis of a major modification. Modification is measured against an operative baseline. The instrument identified in that baseline is an amendment that appears nowhere in the record. Slide. Here's the chronology. In 1970, we have the original development plan, zoning ordinance. Then we have another quasi-judicial decided by city council, moving all the way up through August 8th, 1995, decided by the city council. Then we come down to the baseline instrument where we have no document. Remember, the code requires a major modification to be made in the same way the original plan was established. Here, it's a mystery. The only administrative amendments we have are minor modifications, each within the approved office and manufacturing use. Slide. Which body approved the original development plan? Certainly not this amendment. Slide. If the original is 1971, 1979, or 1985, that chain goes to city council hearings. Only the city council can modify that development plan. If the original is the 2000 instrument, an amendment is not an original, and its file contains no decision document. It is undetermined. Mr. Sexton lacked the capacity, according to our own code, to make a decision on a major modification. Slide. Okay. For access to the record, they stated that standing is determined by who made public comment. The entitlement file was assembled while the public was supposed to be reviewing it. The entire online file was posted a month before the first submittal. The record of decision imposing 3 conditions 1 month before the decision found no prior conditions. After the decision, during the appeal period, we discovered a number of documents with conditions that became part of our appeal. There were conditions precedent even in the administrative approvals. Both Brownstein and the planner assert that there were no conditions. That is incorrect. Next slide. We spoke briefly of heat index conditions. Here, let's hear it for the bees. Very, very small temperature fluctuations can wipe out bees, and the impact on other animals so far is anecdotal, but we need to put a moratorium on these until the science has been established. What really are we doing to our community and our environment? Slide. The code requires the city to identify sensitive natural features. No survey, no habitat assessment, no identification, no determination of any kind. At close of business yesterday, we got a quick note about the bighorn sheep. Information dated July 15th is outside of the approval period of an approval based on the 11th. Slide. Here's the corridor. The approval plan cites a 30-foot wall over ground that the city made unbuildable. It's in a floodplain. The recorded 1981 grant of easement, the owner shall not erect or construct any building or other structure, binding heirs, successors, and assignees. The Corporate Ridge plat labels that same quarter, no building storage. The city's own April 2010 review letter required a no-build storage easement there. Slide.
Hello, I'm Deirdre Aiden Smith. I've been a resident of Chelsea Glen for 26 years. And as Kate briefly mentioned, our community is the home of many people that serve the city. Teachers, police, fire. My husband was employed by CSFD for 32 years before he retired. I also have 20 plus years in commercial development, overseeing major construction projects in the city. And I do want to thank the Planning Commission for their time. I know you're volunteers, and I'm hoping that obviously your adherence to the city's UDC code and the facts we present will sway what has been made. So the sheet before us, M201, this is what was actually approved by city planning. It was in the last package that was submitted. I had begun questioning in March when it was first posted what the mechanical was. As I indicated, I do construction, so my history is based on data. It's looking at what is the equipment, how will it affect a community, what feeds it. So this is the sheet that was actually approved, and as you will note, it is over the amounts that the rest of the DP refers to. It's 72 air-cooled chillers, and it's 60 generators, and it shows a load of 100 megawatts. So I do want to point that out. The next page, please, slide. After this was questioned, and I sent emails to both the city and actually spoke to the developer about it, I was informed there were some errors made. So after the submittal, or after the approval, June 11th, the corrected page was then sent. So this is not stamped. It was being given as a substitute for what was approved, and they have taken out or saying that M201 is a mistake, and the substitute states an office plan. However, the thing I want to point out here is the disclaimers that were added on this page that the developer is wishing to swap to. And it states that, the second disclaimer states that it is to be included, but is not relevant to any other parts of the approved DP. So that statement alone makes this page insufficient to any code because it is not supporting anything else that the city has already looked at. So again, UDC, the code itself, chapter 7, does not recognize any error or mistake in a DP, and that if it is presented in error, typically the city planning will come back and ask that you resubmit, and they have to review that. I state that from the many years of doing projects with the city. We have had to resubmit drawings simply if we have 2 feet off on a patio that's encroaching into what would be a private or public, or if we have a change to a sign. So this should not be a swap, because that is not even ever approved anywhere in UDC in chapter 7. Slide. So again, we go back to the error. So I have emails with both the developer and with the city on the fact stating that they can't, that these are errors. Dan had stated to me that the record will not be revised as it would be interpreted as a subsequent plan modification. And Jason had written an email to me because we had been in communication for months because he was working as a good neighbor with the community, stating that it was just an error by his design team, that really the city just needed to know what the office layout would be so that they could figure out parking. That contradicts every other page of the DP because the first page of the DP submittal references parking and it's all based on building ratios. It has nothing to do with the page that they're submitting as a swap. So again, the city cannot have it both ways because both positions are stating that the page is incorrect and that there was a mistake because earlier parts of the DP reference a smaller load of equipment, but then again we go back to the fact that the equipment that is not being identified. And the first part of, it is not typical in a DP that they have to state the equipment, but once that question is brought up, whether by the public or by the city, and it was brought up by Austin within the city planning department on the very first submittal that he needed to have details on the equipment because that is the only thing that determines both the impact of the community and obviously the noise and the energy requirements. So this page is incorrect. Slide. So we're going to page 30. No, actually slide 30. Sorry. You have to jump ahead. It's out of order in your presentation. I apologize. It's 30. It's the city cannot have it both ways. You've gone too far. Looks like this. Right there. Okay. So we go back to this. The city cannot have it both ways because or contradicting the facts is now actually a recorded covenant because they allowed the developer after their approval letter of June 11th, the statement was released to the public that there would be further documents given by the developer that would be part of the approved plan. Those statements were stated. They did have documents released that they referenced to. Dan spoke about it. The sound mitigation study, or what they're going to do to ensure that the public or the community is not affected, specifically our neighborhood, and then also the assurances that they put up. So again, we're contradicting ourselves here because if M201 stands, which is what is stamped as approved, so it is now part of the DP, it is of record, it's stating that there's 72 chillers and 60 generators, and it's requiring 100 megawatts at a minimum. None of the sound studies that have been done by any party, independent or the 3 by the developer, are based on that number of equipment. So the DP on that fact alone cannot go forward because the studies are not supporting what was presented. On the other side, if the city's saying, oh, I'm sorry, this is a mistake, and as the developers say, then they have to go back and they have to go through the process that they require most of us in the city to do, which is that they have to then ask that the developer submits a new mechanical page reflecting the correct amount of equipment that is substantiated by their own noise studies and that is capped at the 50 megawatts that he has repeatedly told the public that is all he will ever need. So that was supposed to be the amount that will ever be needed at this site now and in the future. And then the documents that he has presented that the city have tied assurances to have to be revised to be based on that. You can't have it both ways. And at that point, I'm going to go to something that came to us last night. We've done numerous core requests, and there was one that was just released last night from CSU, And I don't unfortunately have it in your packet due to the timing. CSU literally just gave it to us yesterday, so I'm going to have to read it. So I apologize for that. So I am entering into the record a mechanical and electrical design package for Project Taurus, prepared by LE Design Group, project number 25188. Colorado Springs Utilities produced it to me under the Open Records Act. There are 7 sheets, M200, M201, E200, E202, E204, E300, and E301. To explain that for everyone here, M is for mechanical. It would list all the equipment. It will show what the power and how it's going to be stacked. E is for electrical. It details what electrical needs are needed to support that equipment and what they're asking CSU for, which is why it was presented to CSU. Every one of these pages carry the same keynote block: 72 chillers and 60 generators, 100 megawatts, 2 data halls, a mod 1 at 50 megawatts and a mod 2 at 50 megawatts. The date on those sheets is December the 15th, 2025. It is the same date on the approved page that the city accepted, M201, which states this exact same detail. These were prepared for the developer 3 months before the application was filed. Again, one of those sheets, M201, is the sheet that the city stamped and approved. I'm just going to shortly go through a timeline. On June 29th, I asked the Raisins president, which is Jason, by telephone. We have a verbal conversation. He tells me that I don't know how to read a mechanical design and that I must be misunderstanding the facts. I said, well, I've not built a data center, but I'd be happy to look at a different drawing. And he states that he'll get me the new page tomorrow and that that was just a mistake by his design team. On July 1st, the city planning writes that the information was presented in error and only intended to reinforce the square footage allocated to office space. In the same email, Dan states it will not be revised as it would be interpreted as a subsequent plan modification, which would impact each of the appeals, and that city planning has discussed possible solutions with the applicant, which will be presented at the appeal hearing. So they're already addressing solutions, ignoring what is required by the UDC code. On July 1st at 9:40 that night, the applicant or developer writes me and states, for reasons I still don't understand, one of Raisin's contracted design firms provided that drawing. He says it's a mistake. On July 3rd, city planning, not to us, this is a core record, states that the same page represents a blunder and that Raisin will prepare a replacement slide for tonight. Those are core requests, those are emails that we received. On July 12th, now it is non-applicable information from an early due diligence stage before material discussions with CSU, yet the package went to CSU in December. So somehow those mistakes existed for 3 months or more, actually 5 months before being cut. So it's a mistake and it's a blunder. It's non-applicable information according to the developer in the city. So I had 3 different answers in 11 days and 1 page, and that page is still in the approved plan today. So I asked for the mechanical design March 17th. I asked the city, I spoke to Austin, I also asked the developer. I was told the equipment would be ordered later and that due to confidentiality, he could not detail the actual equipment specs. The city says that correcting that sheet would be a new modification. If that is true, then that sheet is material, and you are being asked to affirm a plan the city itself says it cannot fix without starting over. This commission should not go forward on this.
Good morning. Thank you all for being here this morning. Thank you, commissioners. My name is John Forshee, and together, John and myself will be speaking briefly about the slides that we're going to see, dealing specifically with sound and infrasound and the omissions from the report. I would just like to make a note that John and I have submitted for the record a copy of the D.L. Adams and Associates sound study with commentary, with comments included by Michael Hankard himself, who is the president and principal of Hankard Environmental. And if you look through the comments, which are interposed between the pages of this document, you'll see his own not glowing assessment of this record. Rather than go through all of his comments, of course, we've submitted his comments for the record, and I would just like to bring the attention to a comment from page 12, where finally the report by DL Adams and Associates includes a table of useful data, and Michael Hankert himself finally acknowledges this is good detailed information. If the rest of this report has similarly detailed information, I could independently audit this analysis, which is to say he was not able to independently audit the analysis based on the lack of data inputs, omissions, vagaries, and inconsistencies that he identifies throughout the rest of the document. First off, noise compliance was judged against the wrong limits. An independent acoustician says, oh, sorry, I'm looking at the wrong thing. The compliance finding uses the wrong yardstick and then measured the wrong machine. Compliance was measured against light industrial limits, not the state residential floor a for-profit operator cannot exceed. Also, the periodic 5 dBA reduction was omitted. The residential night floor is 45 dBA. We've talked a little, and I'm glad to have heard about the inconsistencies introduced using only an A-weighted decibel scale. And that model ran 36 chillers at around 50 megawatts, never the approved 72 chillers at a full 100 megawatts. Slide.
Is anybody falling asleep yet? And just to bring this all, who likes corporate jargon? Anybody? No? Great. Let's circle back, right? The point of this and point of us presenting is the fact that we have 7 grounds to dismiss and stop this appeal. So we have 7. Myself and the other John here are covering G3 and G6. If you can look back at the beginning of our presentation, compliance of sound, right? The sound study was done incorrectly, right? This perfect thing here is saying, like, you look at our presentation, you look at the sound study, it has many contradictions of the free cooling scenarios. It has contradictions throughout it, and they all prove that the sound study can't be used to prove compliance. So that's our main grounds, circling back, right? Bringing it to this ground for dismissal. Their own documents describe that the facility is running most of the time, and while the compliance case assumes it runs quiet, the compliance rests on the reduced load free cooling scenario, and the applicant's own record describes 70-75% of continuous operation spiking to 100%. Their June 21st email concedes that economy mode is only available about half the year.
Slide. We have another completeness gap. 72 chillers appear on the approved plan and were never modeled at any load. So these 34 chillers validated by the city's peer reviewer at 75% load. The 72 chillers on the approved M201 never modeled at any load. This is a completeness gap, not a dispute of predictions. However, a compliance finding for equipment never analyzed is not supported by competent evidence in the report, in the compliance report. Slide.
So, again, sorry, circling back. This entire thing rests on many criteria. All of the criteria and assumptions have not been adequately put into the report. There is no assumptions section in the report. They don't clearly state what they used, how they used it. They don't have the right elevations for our house right at the end of Chutney Court. They use a main receiver point 5 houses downhill from us. So if they want to claim line of sight, the whole line of sight and elevation part was not accounted for. So it could easily reach our house or further up in Kissing Camels. And this one in particular is a major one. They try and use a variable in the calculations of gravel or something zero to reduce the reflections of all the noise coming off of the chillers. And that's an incorrect assumption. They need to use 0.1 or at least 0.5 because it's paved, which is what M201 and all of the other mechanical plans call out in the plans. They call out a different variable that is used in this acoustic study, so it's completely invalid. And this entire thing is resting on at least this and all of the other data that we don't have. We can't confirm any of it, and no one else can either, because it's completely incomplete, to say it so.
For ground 3, again, propagation. As we've heard a little already this morning, barriers lose effectiveness beyond about 400 feet. Low frequency slips through. Night inversion carries sound over the wall. And I don't think that we can overstate the damaging effects of long-term exposure to low frequency noise and infrasound. These long propagation sound waves go right through any barrier, especially barriers close to the sound source. They travel for miles and miles, and they literally have been shown to vibrate the organs in our bodies. Not to mention the havoc that low frequency noise and infrasound wreaks on the ecosystem. As we pointed out, we're close to the longhorn ram, the longhorn sheep, birds, a beautiful environment, all of the inhabitants of which will be affected by the propagation of this 24/7, 365 days a year infrasound low frequency noise. Looking again at propagation, Dudek's Ford Amphitheater, for example, field monitoring measured community sound as the sound the predictive studies did not capture. The same predictive versus measured gap is the same at issue here with Project Taurus. So almost a repeat of some of the noise and noise pollution that we hear with the Ford Amphitheater.
This is directly from the sound study, this chart. I drew the red squares very professionally. And you can see all of the frequencies of lower than about 200 hertz, well above the limits. If we ignore for just a minute the whole 5 decibel reduction and all the codes, everything below 200 hertz is above the city limits. So if you want to listen to anything below 200 hertz 24/7, this data center is going to do it by their own flawed, biased report that cannot be proved or validated. So we're going to split this slide if you want to cover the DBA, DBC.
Sure. As we've heard already a little bit, the metric for measuring the sound output of the data center is totally skewed. Using a weighted decibel scale approximates the thresholds of human hearing. So anything above 20,000 hertz, anything below 20 hertz, more or less, will not be captured using the DBA scale. Now, we've pointed out that the C-weighted decibel scale is a non-filtered scale that captures all sound pressure fluctuations, even below 20 hertz and above 20,000 hertz. And there might be the argument that it's not the industry standard yet. Why cannot Colorado Springs be a trailblazer in this regard and conduct DBC level measurements of the infrasound and noise that's being produced? Just as a quick note, DBA certainly discounts the low frequencies that dominate data center noise. Unweighted, the 63 hertz band is a sustained 88 decibels with no abatement. And 88 decibels is louder than your refrigerator, it's louder than the washer dryer, it's a constant noise band that we're going to hear.
And on that note, I'll try and hurry up as much as I can here. The weights and averages, so on that previous slide, everything under 200 hertz you saw well above. And I know that the city limit, you need one number to go by. And to get that number, instead of just using the highest values, it uses an average of all of them. So if you go back one slide, if you get the 4,000 hertz and you average it with 63 hertz, you're gonna get an average in the middle, which is nice and low. That seems like cherry picking to me. There's gotta be another way to get these values. So even if you use their own study, which this is using, it's finding a number that suits them. So our low frequency, just moving on, low frequency kinetic energy goes straight through walls. We've described that multiple times. All these sound barriers are great. They're a great start to trying to abate the sound, but the low frequencies go straight through it. They shoot straight through it like a bullet through paper. They're not gonna stop anything at those low frequencies. Solid mounds of dirt, concrete might help lower frequencies, but the infrasound, they won't do anything for it. So at a bare minimum, if we're gonna use the dBA scale, we need more, a better way to get a number or use the maximum values, and we need better walls. So this current analysis that is biased, in my opinion, and incomplete, needs better analysis, better standards, and the code needs to change to accommodate for absolute power, which is the DVC scale. The weighted scale is just way, way too biased. And we'll do 31.
You're done? Okay. We'll move quickly through here. I just have a quick note about temperature inversion, something not accounted for at all in the DLAA sound study that we've pointed out. Temperature inversion, normally cooler air rises, we see snow on the snow peaks, not on the ground. Temperature inversion is when that dynamic is flipped and we have a layer of cold air against the ground, sandwiched between the ground and a layer of warmer air above it. In these circumstances, and this is a scenario that happens frequently at night, especially at our altitudes, cold air will have sound move slower but farther. And because of that upward band of warmer air in this kind of inversion scenario, sound waves are pushed down into the colder air, so they propagate farther along the surface of the Earth. So what that means in daily life is we could hear a highway under these circumstances that is miles and miles away, which we would not normally be able to hear if inversion was not at play. Also, the deepest sound that chillers makes enters the model as 0, which we've discussed using this A-weighted decibel scale. The chiller's 31.5 hertz rumble enters the model as 0. The deepest low frequency bypasses the barrier completely at 63 hertz. Slide.
And this is kind of just repeating what we've already said. The lowest frequencies are skipping straight through the sound barrier, so we can move on.
I have one last comment to make on that issue of temperature inversion, something else not monitored or accounted for in the D.L. Adams Associates study is wind. Sound and sound waves are pushed downwards, downwind, so that we hear more sounds and louder sounds farther away if we're downwind from the source. Fewer sounds, less energy if we're upwind from those sounds. So think of temperature inversion and wind factors, two huge factors in our environment and in our community here, not accounted for, not studied, not reported on at all in the existing compliance study.
And sorry, one last thing that is very important. This sound study is also contradictory because it calls out that the sound barriers need to be full to the ground. And then the second sentence after that, it says louvers need to be accounted for. Louvers are openings in the sound wall that have much less, 20 decibels less sound abatement than the rest of the wall. They don't even account for that. The entire study is done using a free online tool that cannot account for louvers or doors or openings in it whatsoever. I went to the site myself, I tried to analyze it. Even paid version, you cannot add louvers or doors or openings to this thing. And according to the fire department, you need doors to open and get to them. The louvers are not accounted for, and they're a much less sound reduction for the transmission rating than the rest of the wall. So, also, another reason why the sound study is terrible, and a professional company needs to use professional software, not free online tools, to evaluate the sound propagation.
Smith, I'm back here for a few moments, and so we're going to go back to the grounds. And so round 4, comparative impact. There's 2 points here that we want to make. One is that the whole point of that is that the June 11 record contains no comparative evaluation of the new fire, fuel storage, or hazardous materials or spill risk. The prior use, the former semiconductor fab, and later the Bitcoin ran all their on-site electrical through a building, a substation, and utility feeds. There was no outdoor diesel or generator installation. So just as a quick reference, again, I'll go back to the drawing that's also been in the packet. So these buildings that the city referred to as minor, they're actually quite large. They're between 12 and 20,000 square feet. And so those are being demolished. And so these used to house the electrical, and then none of that was exposed. That was part of the original BP, and that's in all of the documents through there. And so these are being demolished, and you're going to go to exterior yards that have all the chillers. They're sitting in the setbacks. So we are violating many things that were in the BP for that business park. But in addition, they're being stored outside. There's no comparative analysis of what that risk will be to the community or to the homes that are 368 feet away. So that is a failure in the code. Going back to that comparative impact analysis again, the modification is removing the surface parking buffer that's been recorded on the property since its first use. And they're then installing the chiller, and at one point they had the generator yards before it was moved. So those are now on the south side. The chillers are facing the homes. That BP, the business park rezoning, cut the rear setback from the 50 feet it had been since the beginning documents to 25, and it eliminated the 30% lot coverage cap. The city did not weigh any of this against the prior use. So again, that comparative analysis is not there. So this is what adjacent means. It's 368 feet to the nearest home. So that is where both sound, noise, heat, whatever you want to call it, is going to go there. And the slide I put up here is just an example. If this is within the lot, so this is where the development, where the chillers and the other equipment will be when that building's gone, and that is how close the neighborhood really is. So that is the backyard for someone. So that is adjacent. And then the next slide, the 45-foot wall, we're just talking about that. That is actually now on the north side because again, the generators were moved. So that 45-foot wall is either hiding 30 generators or it's hiding 60. No one's quite clear since the mechanical page is incorrect. So the scale of that obviously is much higher than the housing in that neighborhood. So 2 days before, the next slide please. So 2 days before the hearing, the city confirmed that the reviews didn't exist. So the city had stated that in accord, the project is not far enough along to have any hazardous materials, fuel tank, generator, water supply, hydrant, or fire life safety reviews. However, so none of those things have been reviewed, but yet we're approving it. So I'm not quite sure how we got there. And lastly, we go back to the round 5 of the UDC, which is the equipment is sized for 100 megawatts. Again, it's never been specified. I go back to my March request, which is all I needed to know is the data. I just need to know the equipment. We have contradictory information being presented, but what is approved is the 72 chillers, the 60 generators, and 100 megawatts. Thank you.
Section 7.2.401A divides the business park zone as operations that are quiet and clean, protect the occupants from unintended and adverse noise. The properties that are there now are El Paso County's building, Colorado Technical University, and a food processing plant that makes a thickening agent for people like my mother who had ALS who cannot swallow without the thickening enhancement. All of those are quiet industries. None of them have an impact. An example, they have just changed the UTC to include data centers in the light industry definition. Light industry is industry that is engaged in the manufacture or processing of finished products from previously prepared materials. Commercial bakeries, dressed beef processing, bottling, apparel assembly, electronics manufacturing, and print shops. And somehow, one of these things is not like the other. Data centers got dropped just right in there. When we're going for the data center that was first mentioned as data center and office space, they had 602 parking spaces allocated to the building. That was on their own development plan number 1. On development plan number 2, submitted on April 22nd, 2026, those parking places were reduced to 16. Data center development plan number 3, submitted May 27th, 2 weeks before the approval, 10. When we spoke to Jason of Radon, he said there may be 5 employees. So this is not bringing jobs to Colorado. The code gave the manager 1 job before this could proceed without a land use plan. He didn't do it. Section 7.2.401C says, former PIP parcels can be exempt from the land use plan requirement only when the manager determines the development is not of an anticipated size or intensity. We found, with thousands of dollars of chorus, no assessment of size or intensity, no determination whatsoever. Again, a gap in the record. It needs to be remanded and evaluated fully. Skip 2. It's with a picture of Grand Virginia. One more. Okay, so the point we're making in a community context, what facilities this size do. We have Great Oak, Virginia, and Warrenton, Virginia. Amazon, and these projects are half the size of ours. But the strongest precedent is this site itself. When we had 3G Ventures Bitcoin operation between 2018 and 2022, the city measurements were constantly 48 to 50.5 decibels at or over the residential night limit. Same building, same neighbors, a government measurement. Skip 2. We have a double standard here. The city already told the owner the count on an approved plan governs and cannot change without an amendment. It cannot now say that the count doesn't matter. This is going back to our number of generators, number of chillers, and the effectiveness of the studies that they proposed. Slide 50, the 3 walls. On grounds 3 and ground 6, we have 3 walls. The only document that recites the criteria describes only 1, the 30-foot south perimeter over the quarter burdened by the 1981 no structure easement running to the city itself. June 15th memorandum, the only document recites the criteria describes the 30-foot wall. The dimensional standards of part 7.4.2 were never applied to any of these 3 walls. The chiller yard noise mitigation, generator yard noise mitigation, and take noise seriously. A data center plant needs an uninterrupted power source. Anybody who lives on the west side knows what happens when demand exceeds supply. Almost 6,000 homes were without power. This data center will be needing to run its on-site power plant. That is what it is. 24/7 to maintain the temperatures needed to preserve the chips. Could you take me to slide 53 where the heat goes? We have 100 megawatts of heat that is being rejected into the air beside these homes. The record contains not one calculation about heat. This goes back to needing a moratorium until we understand heat islands, heat impacts on the community, on our environment, on our own businesses. I was telling you about the food processing plant that is producing food for vulnerable population. These people need a clean fuel supply. Their generators are going to have to run higher, longer to run filtration systems because no longer can the air they pull from outside be used without extra scrubbers because we now have a diesel field next door. 267. Skipping the recording. Okay, so we have slide 58, please. We have 7 independent grounds. 7 affirmances requires them to sustain every single finding. Each ground alone defeats the approval. Affirmance requires every finding the record supports none of these. We went from 7 grounds. Within each grounds, we added counts. When we added the supplement, we are now up to 115 reasons that this administrative approval fails. We are volunteers. We use due diligence. We expect the same of the city.
Just as a reminder, you have a little shy of 5 minutes on the clock. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, being in charge of the clicker is tough, guys. All right, so what we're going to talk about here is the fact that the industry does not dispute the premise of what we're talking about today. The co-chair of the President of the United States Council on Advisors on Science and Technology said this month while talking about data centers, you obviously don't want to put these things right next to a residential area. I mean, I probably don't really need to say more than that, but I'm going to. We've heard a lot of false dichotomies related to Project Taurus. One of the more distorted ones is that you somehow don't support the military if you don't support this data center. However, 2 things can be true at once. It can be true that the President of the United States is prioritizing AI, while at the same time it can be true that this is not the right location for a data center. Where Ron, my neighbor, and I come from, humans are more important than hardware. All right, I'll go through this as fast as I can. We won't get into this too much, but this is meant to be illustrative, not one of our grounds. But the costs for Project Taurus in many ways fall on the community, and I'm not just talking utility rates. I'm tracking the large load rate, so please bear with me on this one, guys. You can see on the slide that national data center demand is a primary reason for a $23 billion in customer price increases lasting through the end of 2028. While Colorado Springs is at least one of, I think, like 36 utilities that have adopted large load tariffs, industry analysts caution this may not completely protect resident customers from data center related costs. The rate structure addresses direct infrastructure and cost shifting, but infrastructure costs can be hard to isolate. Without regular studies and strict enforcement, it's missing the teeth that it needs to be truly effective and address indirect effects like tighter regional power supply and demand balances and things like that. I'd go more, but I don't want to take up the time. CSU acknowledges it's facing significant pressure with inquiries from projects requesting hundreds of megawatts of power, with some of the prospective projects ranging somewhere between 500 and 600 megawatts. And that's against a system that currently operates sort of, I believe at best, at 1,400 megawatts. So we ask that the commission recommend a moratorium on data centers to City Council. Examples from Colorado Springs and across the country tell us who bears the costs of a hyperscale data center. The ratepayers. We're already on EnergyWise and Smart Energy, and I know I'm not the only one in my neighborhood who had their thermostat go up to 80 over the weekend, right? A deliberate pause is needed for the city to understand how a hyperscale data center will cost the people that they're meant to protect. The impact on their wallets, their homes, their health, and their ability to live the lives they thought they were signing up for when they heard that Colorado Springs was one of the best places to live 2 years ago. Do you want to take over or you want me to close up? Yeah? All right. I'm not the professional, but I'm going to try. In close, we ask for a moratorium to be established. The reality is that everyone on the grid will pay the cost, even with the large load tariff. until the science is clearly studied. And as you heard in the city planning opening, the regulations and the studies haven't caught up to this. So we asked to reverse the June 11th approval and send it back for a full processing before this commission at a noticed hearing, and that all the size and intensity determination be on the record. Anybody else? Thank you, that ends the integrity matters.
Okay, can we have some order in the room, please? Are you part of the Integrity Matters group?
I excuse myself from Integrity Matters. As my constitutional right, I'm allowed 2 minutes today to speak as a member of Kissing Camels.
You can do that during.
I have a letter here.
Yeah, you can do that during public comment later this afternoon. This time is for the Appellant Group and only those that were associated with the Appellant. Did you file an appeal with the city, ma'am?
I have a letter here.
Can you tell me your name, please?
Excuse me?
Can you tell me your name?
Cynthia Hurwitz.
Okay, hold 1 moment, please.
Yeah, sorry, there's a little bit of confusion going on. Trevor Gross with the City Attorney's Office. So, as part of the appeal procedure, each appellant group is given a certain amount of time. Your appellant group was represented by Integrity Matters. There were 34 people that signed on to that appeal.
I have a letter here from Dana stating that since I chose to become my own appellant, I have a 2-minute window to talk.
You do,
And it
that
was
is
sent
due
to you all.
You do, and that is due during the public comment period. Because you removed yourself from the